Captain Leon Hayes's eyes flickered open to a world submerged in twilight, his entire body itching from the crash impact. His pulse pounded in his ears as he struggled to remember. Images of his fleet's ambush burned through his mind. The Iskari, a highly telepathic alien species, had attacked without warning, overwhelming his squadron. He recalled his fighter jet spinning uncontrollably towards the surface of this unknown world before everything went black. He groaned as he tried to sit up, only to feel sharp pains shooting through his ribs. His flight suit was torn, and blood trickled from small cuts along his arms and legs. The forest surrounding him was unlike anything he had ever seen. Giant, luminous trees stretched to the sky, casting flickering shadows across the forest floor. Strange glowing flowers shimmered softly, bathing the surroundings in an eerie, otherworldly light. Leon instinctively reached for his sidearm. Empty. His comms device was fried, and his emergency supplies had scattered in the chaos of the descent. He stood up slowly, scanning his surroundings. If he was going to survive here, he'd need to stay sharp. His first priority: shelter. As he moved through the dense undergrowth, Leon sensed he wasn't alone. A flicker of movement from the corner of his eye sent a chill down his spine. He froze, straining to hear beyond the forest's natural hum. Then, emerging from the shadows, came figures moving with fluid grace, tall, imposing, and not human. The figures closed in, revealing themselves as alien women, their forms sleek and powerful. Their skin shimmered in deep hues of emerald and cobalt, as if absorbing the very essence of the forest. Long dark hair cascaded down their backs, adorned with glowing stones woven through braids. They were armed, but there was no immediate malice in their movements, only a cautious, predatory curiosity. Leon raised his hands slowly, palms facing outward, signaling he meant no harm. "I don't want trouble," he said, though his voice trembled slightly. The leader of the group, a towering woman with piercing violet eyes, studied him intently. She murmured something in a melodic, foreign tongue, her voice resonating like a song carried on the wind. Two of the women approached Leon, their glowing eyes fixed on him. Before he could react, they began stripping the remnants of his flight suit, piece by piece. Leon's heart raced, but he forced himself to stay still. There was no hostility in their touch, only fascination, as though they were examining a rare artifact. Their hands, surprisingly gentle, traced his scars and the texture of his skin. The leader stepped closer, placing a hand against his chest, her expression unreadable. The connection that surged through Leon's body was unlike anything he had felt before. A blend of warmth, curiosity, and something more, something primal. His mind raced with questions. Who were these beings? Why were they so interested in him? And more importantly, what did they plan to do next? Leon stood frozen as the alien women continued their quiet inspection, their touch exploring his arms, chest, and shoulders with deliberate curiosity. He clenched his jaw, forcing himself to remain calm. The leader's hand lingered over his chest, her violet eyes locking with his, radiating an energy that was both unsettling and oddly captivating. There was no hostility, only an intense fascination, like a scientist examining a species they had never encountered before. One of the women, with midnight blue skin and glimmering braids, ran her fingers along the edge of a scar that cut across Leon's ribs. She tilted her head, murmuring softly in their alien language, as if pondering the origin of the wound. Another brushed his hair between her fingers, marveling at the coarseness, a sharp contrast to their own sleek and flowing locks. Leon's muscles tensed, and his mind screamed for escape, but he knew better than to act impulsively. Without his weapons or comms, he was entirely at their mercy, and whether they were captors or something else remained to be seen. He knew, however, that survival would depend on playing along, at least until he understood their motives. The leader finally withdrew her hand from his chest and spoke in a low, melodious tone that carried weight, as if she were giving a command. Her companions responded immediately, retreating slightly but keeping their glowing eyes trained on him. Leon exhaled slowly, relief washing over him, though the tension in the air remained thick. Strange silence settled between them, broken only by the rustle of leaves and the distant hum of the alien forest. Leon took the moment to speak again, hoping to establish some form of communication. "My name is Leon," he said, pointing to himself. "Leon." The leader tilted her head slightly, her violet eyes narrowing in thought. She repeated the word, though her pronunciation was soft and musical, transforming his name into something unfamiliar. "Leon," she whispered, as if testing it on her tongue. The others murmured in response, their expressions flickering with recognition, or perhaps amusement. The gesture gave Leon a sliver of hope. If they could mimic his words, perhaps they could understand more. He pointed at her this time, raising his eyebrows as he spoke. "And you?" The leader stared at him for a long moment, as if debating whether to answer. Then, placing a hand against her chest, she uttered a single word in a voice that seemed to hum through the air. "Ahara." Leon nodded slowly, repeating her name under his breath. "Ashara." She smiled, barely a flicker at the corner of her lips, but it was enough to shift the atmosphere. The others seemed to relax, their postures loosening. Leon sensed that this was a moment of significance, a fragile bridge being built between two vastly different beings. Suddenly, Ashara gestured toward the forest with a sweeping motion of her arm, her expression softening further. She spoke again, the words unintelligible but accompanied by an inviting tone. It was clear she wanted him to follow. Leon hesitated. Whatever their intentions were, he knew he had no real choice. Alone and stranded in an alien wilderness, the only path forward lay with these mysterious women. Taking a deep breath, he gave a cautious nod and stepped toward Ashara. She turned gracefully, her companions forming a loose circle around him as they moved deeper into the forest. The path was barely visible, hidden beneath dense vegetation, but the women navigated it with ease. Leon stumbled occasionally, unused to the terrain, but Ashara would glance back each time, as if ensuring he kept up. As they walked, Leon couldn't help but notice how seamlessly the women seemed to blend with the forest. Their skin shimmered like the leaves in the twilight, and the faint luminescence of their bodies flickered in harmony with the bioluminescent plants around them. They were a part of this world in a way he could never be. After what felt like an hour of silent travel, they emerged into a clearing. In the center stood an enormous tree, its trunk wider than a house and its branches stretching toward the sky like ancient arms. Glowing tendrils hung from the canopy, casting a soft, ethereal light over the clearing. Beneath the tree, intricate patterns were carved into the earth, symbols and shapes that radiated a quiet sense of power. Ashara motioned for Leon to sit at the base of the tree. Reluctantly, he obeyed, lowering himself onto the cool, moss-covered ground. The other women gathered around them, forming a circle that felt both ceremonial and protective. Leon watched as Ashara knelt in front of him, her violet eyes never leaving his. She reached into a small pouch at her side and pulled out a vial filled with a shimmering golden liquid. Holding it carefully, she spoke a few words in her language, her voice soft but commanding. She held the vial toward Leon, offering it to him. He hesitated. Was this a gesture of trust, or a test? His instincts told him it could be dangerous to accept anything without knowing what it was. But declining might offend them, and in his vulnerable state, that was a risk he couldn't afford. Leon took the vial, his fingers brushing against Ashara's as he did. The contact sent another ripple of energy through him, a strange warmth that made the hairs on his arms stand on end. He uncorked the vial and sniffed the liquid. It smelled faintly of citrus and earth, oddly pleasant, yet entirely unfamiliar. With a deep breath, he raised the vial to his lips and took a cautious sip. The liquid was cool and smooth, sliding down his throat like silk. Almost instantly, A warmth spread through his body, soothing the aches from the crash and clearing the fog in his mind. Azhara smiled again, this time more visibly, and the other women murmured in approval. Leon felt his heartbeat steadying, the tension in his muscles easing. Whatever the drink was, it had done something to him, something he couldn't quite explain. But it wasn't unpleasant. As he handed the empty vial back to Azhara, she gave him a slow, approving nod. The women exchanged glances, their expressions shifting from curiosity to something more welcoming. For the first time since the crash, Leon felt a glimmer of hope. He was still a stranger in an unknown world, surrounded by beings he couldn't understand. But he was alive, and for now, he had allies. And perhaps, just perhaps, this was the beginning of something far greater than survival. Leon's body felt lighter, his mind sharper as the strange warmth from the drink continued to course through him. The subtle tension in his muscles melted away, leaving him alert but calm. Azhara gave him another nod, signaling him to rise, and as he stood, the other women began to move once again, their steps synchronized with the forest's hum. Azhara motioned for him to follow as they weaved through the undergrowth. This time, Leon noticed a change in the atmosphere. Where the forest had once felt foreboding, it now seemed alive and welcoming. The plants around them swayed gently, glowing in soft waves that mirrored the women's presence, almost as if the entire environment responded to their movements. Leon knew he had stepped into something much larger than himself, something ancient. These beings weren't just inhabitants of this world. They were connected to it in ways he couldn't begin to understand. The question that gnawed at him was, why had they accepted him, complete outsider, into their midst? As they continued deeper into the forest, Leon's thoughts were interrupted by a distant, haunting sound, something between a hum and a roar. He glanced toward Azhara, whose expression darkened at the noise. The other women immediately slowed, exchanging concerned glances. Leon tensed, his survival instincts kicking in. "What is it?" he whispered, though he knew they wouldn't understand him. Azhara gave him a glance that needed no translation. Something dangerous was near. She held up a hand, signaling for him to stay close as the group pressed forward with renewed urgency. Whatever lurked beyond the trees, it was something they were cautious of, even in their own territory. They reached another clearing, this one bordered by massive stone pillars that jutted from the earth like ancient monuments. Strange symbols, glowing faintly, were carved into the rock. Azhara approached one of the pillars, pressing her hand against it. The stone responded, pulsing with light before revealing a hidden passage beneath the forest floor. Without hesitation, the women began descending into the opening, beckoning Leon to follow. He hesitated for only a moment, the weight of the unknown pressing against his mind. But staying behind in the open forest was not an option, not with whatever threat loomed nearby. The passage led into an underground chamber, dimly lit by bioluminescent crystals embedded in the walls. It was cooler here, the air thick with the scent of damp stone and moss. Azhara gestured toward a smooth stone slab, and Leon sat down, his mind swirling with questions. The leader knelt in front of him once more, placing her hands gently on his temples. Her touch sent a wave of calm through him, and for a moment, Leon felt as though their minds brushed together. Fleeting connection that was both strange and intimate. Images flashed before his eyes, visions of the women's lives on this world, their rituals, their connection to the forest, and the challenges they faced. He saw glimpses of a massive predator, its glowing eyes lurking in the shadows, and understood that this creature was a constant threat to them. When the connection broke, Leon gasped, his heart racing. Azhara withdrew her hands and gave him a solemn look, her violet eyes full of meaning. Though no words were spoken, Leon understood. They had shared with him their world, their fears, and their trust. In return, they expected something from him, something he wasn't sure he could provide. Before he could dwell further on the implications, A distant roar echoed through the underground chamber. The predator was close. The women exchanged quick glances, and Azhara barked an urgent command. They moved swiftly, preparing for whatever was coming. Leon's mind raced. He was unarmed, exhausted, and unfamiliar with their tactics. But he knew one thing for sure. If they were to survive, he would need to prove himself useful. With a deep breath, he stood and met Azhara's gaze. "Tell me what to do," he said, knowing full well that she wouldn't understand his words, but hoping the intention behind them was clear. Azhara gave him a faint smile, one that carried both approval and reassurance. Whatever lay ahead, they would face it together. The distant roar reverberated through the underground chamber, sending a shiver down Leon's spine. The women moved with swift precision, readying themselves for whatever was approaching. Azhara motioned toward the entrance of the passage, issuing commands in her melodic language. Two of the women took up defensive positions, their spear-like weapons glimmering under the glow of the bioluminescent crystals. Leon stood frozen, his mind racing. He had no weapon, no plan, only a mounting sense that his survival depended on proving his worth to these beings. If he was going to stand a chance with them, he needed to help. The ground beneath them trembled, and the low hum of the forest above grew louder, as if the trees themselves were warning of the beast's arrival. Azhara locked eyes with Leon, her expression calm but firm. She pointed to the far wall where a jagged piece of stone jutted out, sharp enough to serve as a makeshift weapon. Leon didn't need further instruction. He sprinted across the chamber, yanking the stone free and gripping it tightly. It wasn't much, but it was better than nothing. He moved toward the entrance where the two guards were stationed, positioning himself between them. Azhara gave a slight nod of approval before joining the others in preparing for the fight. The roar grew closer, accompanied by heavy footfalls that shook the ground. Leon tightened his grip on the stone, his knuckles turning white. His heart pounded in his chest, but he forced himself to remain steady. Whatever was coming, he would meet it head-on. A shadow flickered at the entrance, followed by a monstrous figure that emerged from the forest. The creature was unlike anything Leon had ever seen. A massive predatory beast with glowing blue eyes and a sleek, obsidian-black body covered in scales. It moved with terrifying speed, muscles rippling beneath its hide as it closed in on the passage. The guards acted without hesitation, thrusting their spears toward the beast. It let out a deafening roar, swiping with razor-sharp claws that clanged against their weapons. Leon saw the opportunity and lunged forward, driving the jagged stone into the creature's side. The beast snarled in fury, twisting toward him, but Leon rolled out of its reach just in time. Azhara barked another command, and the women sprang into action, surrounding the beast with practiced precision. Their movements were fluid, almost dance-like, as they struck at the creature from different angles, keeping it off balance. Leon followed their lead, using the stone to jab and distract the monster whenever it turned its attention toward one of the others. The battle was fierce and fast, with the beast's snarls and the clang of weapons filling the chamber. Leon fought through the exhaustion that threatened to overtake him, adrenaline surging through his veins. He had never fought alongside beings so foreign, yet their teamwork felt instinctive, as if they had been fighting together for years. At last, Azhara delivered the final blow, driving her spear into the beast's throat. The creature let out one final, guttural roar before collapsing in a heap, its glowing eyes dimming as life drained from its body. Silence fell over the chamber, broken only by the sound of labored breathing. Leon staggered back, his chest heaving as he tried to catch his breath. Blood from the beast coated his hands and arms, and the jagged stone he held felt heavier than before. Azhara approached him, her violet eyes filled with something he hadn't seen before, respect. She placed a hand on his shoulder, giving him a slow, approving nod. The other women murmured among themselves, their expressions shifting from guarded curiosity to quiet admiration. For the first time since the crash, Leon felt like more than just a helpless outsider. He had fought beside them, stood his ground, and earned their trust. Ahura's gaze lingered on him for a moment longer before she turned toward the others, issuing new orders. The women began to move quickly, dragging the beast's carcass deeper into the chamber. Leon watched as they worked with practiced efficiency, gathering supplies and preparing to make use of the creature's remains. It was clear that nothing would go to waste, not even the monster that had nearly killed them. As the adrenaline faded, Leon slumped against the wall, exhaustion washing over him like a tidal wave. His limbs ached, and the stone slipped from his fingers, clattering to the ground. He closed his eyes for a brief moment, allowing himself a small respite. Azhara knelt beside him, offering a flask filled with the same golden liquid from before. Leon accepted it gratefully, the cool drink soothing his parched throat and easing the soreness in his muscles. As he handed the flask back to her, he caught a glimpse of something in her expression, something that felt like pride. "You fought well," Azhara said, her voice soft but filled with meaning. Though the words were spoken in her own language, Leon understood them clearly. The connection they had shared earlier ran deeper than words. It was a bond forged through survival. Leon gave her a tired smile. "Thanks," he murmured, knowing she wouldn't understand. But it didn't matter. The gratitude in his eyes was enough. As the women finished their work and the chamber began to quiet once more, Leon allowed himself to relax. For the first time since the crash, he felt a sense of belonging. A feeling that, against all odds, he had found allies in this strange and beautiful world. But as he drifted off to sleep, one thought lingered in the back of his mind. This was only the beginning. The forest held many secrets, and he was determined to uncover them, no matter what dangers lay ahead. Leon awoke to the soothing hum of the forest, feeling the soft warmth of the golden drink still lingering in his veins. The battle with the beasts seemed like a distant memory, though the ache in his muscles reminded him that it had been real. The alien women were already awake and moving, their graceful forms weaving through the chamber as they prepared for the day ahead. Azhara stood near the remains of the beast, her hands working skillfully to extract materials, bones, hide, and scales, all of which seemed to hold value to her people. The others joined in, treating the monster not as a defeated enemy, but as a resource to be respected. Leon watched them work, amazed at the silent efficiency of their teamwork. He stretched, wincing as his body protested, but the soreness was far less than he expected. Whatever the golden liquid was, it had healing properties beyond anything he had encountered before. He stood and made his way toward Azhara, who glanced up at his approach, her expression calm but attentive. Leon gestured toward the carcass, then to himself. "What can I do to help?" Azhara tilted her head, considering his offer. After a moment, she handed him a sharp, bone-handled tool and motioned toward the beast's hide. Leon took the hint and set to work, slicing the thick skin from the creature's body. It was tough work, but the rhythmic motion of his hands gave him something to focus on, a task that grounded him in this strange new reality. As they worked side by side, Azhara occasionally glanced at Leon with an expression of quiet curiosity. It was as if she was still trying to figure him out, to understand how someone so foreign could fit into their world. And yet, there was no hostility, only acceptance. After some time, Azhara spoke, her voice low and deliberate. She pointed to the beast's heart, which lay on a stone slab nearby, still glowing faintly with residual energy. Her words were incomprehensible, but Leon could feel the significance behind them. This wasn't just about survival. It was a ritual, a way of honoring the life that had been taken. Without fully understanding, Leon nodded. Azhara's violet eyes softened, and she handed him the heart, placing her hands gently over his to steady the weight. Together, they carried it to the center of the chamber, where an intricate symbol was etched into the ground. Azhara whispered something under her breath. A prayer, perhaps. and Leon felt a strange energy pulse through the air. He placed the heart within the center of the symbol, and the air around them seemed to hum with life. The glowing crystals on the walls pulsed brighter for a brief moment, then dimmed to a steady glow. The ritual was complete. Leon exhaled, feeling a sense of peace settle over him. It wasn't just about honoring the fallen beast. It was about acknowledging his place in this world, however strange it might be. Azahara gave him a small, approving smile, and for the first time, Leon felt truly connected to these beings. Just as the moment began to settle, a sudden noise echoed from the entrance. A low rumble, followed by distant voices. Leon tensed, and the women exchanged concerned glances. Azahara moved quickly, signaling for the others to take up defensive positions. Leon didn't need to understand the language to know what was happening. Someone, or something, was coming. He grabbed his makeshift weapon from earlier, standing at Azahara's side as they prepared for the unknown. The voices grew louder, accompanied by the sound of footsteps. Whoever was approaching, they were not alone. The figures that appeared at the entrance were unlike the forest women. These newcomers were heavily armored, their bodies covered in sleek metallic suits that gleamed under the chamber's light. Their faces were obscured by helmets, and strange devices were strapped to their backs, emitting a low mechanical hum. Leon's heart sank. These were not friendly visitors. He could see it in the way Azahara's posture shifted, her muscles tensing as she raised her spear. Whatever conflict lay between these two groups, it was about to reignite. The leader of the armored figures stepped forward, speaking in a language that sounded harsh and guttural, filled with sharp, clipped syllables. Azahara responded in her own melodic tongue, her voice calm but firm. The exchange between them was tense, and Leon could sense the barely contained hostility simmering beneath the surface. He knew this situation could escalate at any moment. If a fight broke out, he would need to act fast, both to protect himself and to help Azahara and the others. But he also knew that violence might not be the answer. There had to be another way. Leon stepped forward, raising his hands in a gesture of peace. "Wait," he said, his voice steady but urgent. "We don't need to fight." The leader of the armored figures turned toward him, their helmet tilting slightly as if assessing the strange human standing among the forest women. Leon knew he was taking a risk, but he had to try. Whatever differences existed between these groups, there had to be a way to resolve them without bloodshed. Azahara gave him a cautious glance, but she did not stop him. The leader of the armored group muttered something under their breath, and the tension in the air thickened. For a moment, it seemed as though violence was inevitable. Then, something unexpected happened. The leader of the armored figures reached up and removed their helmet, revealing a face that was both familiar and strange. Their features were sharp, almost human, but with subtle differences. Their skin was a deep metallic hue, and their eyes glowed faintly, much like the forest women's. Leon realized with a shock that these beings were not so different from Azahara and her people. There was a shared history here, buried beneath layers of conflict and misunderstanding. And in that moment, he knew what he had to do. He turned to Azahara, meeting her gaze with quiet determination. "Let me try," he whispered, hoping she would understand. She hesitated for only a moment before giving him a small nod. Leon stepped forward, standing between the two groups, and began to speak, not with words, but with gestures and expressions, bridging the gap between two worlds. It wasn't perfect, and it wasn't easy, but slowly, the tension began to ease. The armored figures lowered their weapons, and the forest women relaxed their stances. It was a small step, but it was enough. For the first time, Leon felt the flicker of hope. Hope that there was a way forward, a path toward peace. And in that moment, he knew that his journey on this strange world was far from over. Leon stood between the two groups, Azahara's forest people and the newly arrived armored beings, his heart pounding as he attempted to maintain the fragile peace he had just forged. The weight of the moment pressed heavily on him. These two groups were connected somehow, their differences buried under conflict and mistrust. But the fact that they had paused, even momentarily, gave him hope that there was a way forward. The leader of the armored beings, whose metallic skin shimmered under the chamber's soft light, studied Leon carefully. Their eyes glowed faintly, flickering with curiosity. Leon met their gaze, keeping his expression neutral but determined. He turned to Azhara, gesturing toward the newcomers with an open hand. "Can we talk?" he asked, knowing she wouldn't understand the words but hoping she could sense the intention behind them. Azhara gave a small, reluctant nod, her violet eyes guarded but willing. The other women shifted uneasily but kept their weapons lowered. Leon exhaled in relief. It was a fragile step forward, but it was a step nonetheless. The leader of the armored beings murmured something to their companions, who responded with clipped nods before lowering their weapons. Leon sensed that they, too, were wary but willing to see where this moment led. Leon took another step forward, slowly and deliberately. With gestures, he motioned toward the ground, inviting both groups to sit in a gesture of neutrality. The forest women exchanged glances, clearly uneasy with the idea, but Azhara gave a subtle signal, and they reluctantly obeyed. The armored beings hesitated before following suit, their movements stiff and mechanical. For the next few minutes, Leon did what he could to facilitate communication between the two groups. It wasn't easy. Most of it involved gestures, body language, and tentative expressions. But to his surprise, there were moments of recognition between the two groups. Azhara's people and the armored beings shared subtle expressions and glances, as if they were recalling fragments of a long-lost connection. Leon realized with a start, these two factions weren't enemies by nature. They were family, perhaps different tribes, separated by time and conflict, now standing on opposite sides without fully remembering why. Azhara leaned toward Leon, her expression softening as she whispered something in her melodic language. He couldn't understand her words, but the look in her eyes told him everything. She was asking if he believed peace was possible. Leon nodded. If they had come this far, there was no reason to stop now. Just as the tension seemed to dissolve, a distant sound shattered the fragile peace. Rumbling roar, more powerful and menacing than the beast they had fought earlier. Both groups jumped to their feet, weapons drawn. The ground trembled beneath them as a dark shadow loomed at the entrance of the chamber. Leon's heart dropped as a colossal figure emerged. A beast unlike anything he had seen before. It was far larger than the predator they had faced earlier, with multiple glowing eyes and armor like scales that shimmered with dark energy. This was no ordinary creature. It was a force of nature, a threat to everyone in the chamber. Without hesitation, Azhara barked commands to her people, and the armored leader did the same. There was no time to argue or hesitate. Both groups moved in unison, their past differences forgotten in the face of a greater threat. Leon grabbed his makeshift weapon, but Azhara pulled him back, handing him a spear crafted from the bones of the previous beast. He gave her a grateful nod and took his place beside her. The massive creature let out a deafening roar and charged toward them. Leon, Azhara, and the others scattered, avoiding its crushing claws. The women attacked with grace, their movements synchronized with the rhythm of the forest. The armored beings fought with precision, their weapons humming with unfamiliar energy. Leon darted between the two groups, using his spear to distract the creature whenever it focused on one side. It was a chaotic battle, one that tested every ounce of his strength and resolve. But as he fought, Leon felt a strange sense of unity. For the first time, these two groups were fighting together, side by side, bound by a shared goal. The battle raged on, with the massive beast roaring in frustration as it struggled to keep up with the coordinated attacks. Leon's muscles burned with exhaustion, but he refused to stop. Every strike, every dodge, brought them one step closer to victory. Finally, Azhara saw an opening. With a sharp command, she signaled for Leon and the armored leader to flank the beast. Leon sprinted toward the creature's side, his spear raised high. At the same moment, the armored leader leaped onto the beast's back, driving a glowing blade into its spine. The beast let out one final, ear-splitting roar before collapsing in a heap, its glowing eyes dimming as life drained from its body. The chamber fell silent once more, the echoes of the battle fading into the distance. Leon dropped to his knees, gasping for breath. His body ached, his hands trembling from the intensity of the fight. But when he looked up, he saw something remarkable. Azhara and the armored leader standing side by side, their expressions filled with mutual respect. The two groups slowly lowered their weapons, exchanging cautious glances. The tension that had once divided them was gone, replaced by a sense of shared triumph. For the first time, they stood not as enemies, but as allies. Azhara turned to Leon, her violet eyes filled with gratitude. She placed a hand on his shoulder and gave him a nod, a silent acknowledgement of everything he had done. Leon smiled, feeling a deep sense of accomplishment. He had come to this world as a stranger, lost and alone. But through determination, resilience, and a little bit of luck, he had found his place, not just among the forest women, but in the heart of something far greater. With the beast defeated and the tension between the two groups dissolved, the chamber was filled with a sense of quiet relief. Leon watched as Azhara and the armored leader spoke in hushed tones, their words flowing like a shared melody. Though he couldn't understand them, he knew they were discussing the future, one that would no longer be shaped by conflict, but by cooperation. The two groups began to work together, gathering the remains of the beast and preparing for the journey ahead. Azhara approached Leon, offering him a small object, a glowing stone carved with intricate symbols. He accepted it with a smile, sensing that it was more than just a gift. It was a token of trust, a symbol of the bond they had formed. As the first light of dawn filtered through the forest canopy, the two groups emerged from the chamber, stepping into a world that felt new and full of possibility. Leon stood beside Azhara, his heart filled with hope. He had no idea what the future held, but he knew one thing for certain. He was no longer just a soldier stranded on an alien world. He was part of something bigger, something that had the power to change everything. And together, they would face whatever came next.